And here we go. So I'll start.
Okay.
Welcome. This is another episode of Between Two Teachers. I'm Madeline Cronenberg.
And I'm Consuelo Lara.
And we're here again to speak with you from the very sacred ancestral land of the Ohlone, the Chochenyo Karkin Ohlone people. And we want to speak today, we're going to start with an international story. And this comes from the Canadians, our Canadian educators. There was an article this week called How to Ruin a World-Class Education System. And this is by Michael Fullen, who I have seen in a number of CSBA events. He's an absolute leader in education thought. And he wrote about Canada. And the Canadian system has long been the envy of the world in terms of its testing scores and how well it operates. But he sees big problems in the future. And so I'll just read a little bit. He said, politicians love a crisis. The pandemic is a perfect one. If they wish, governments can keep people constantly off balance, distracted by hokey pokey, back to school strategies that are online, offline, back to school, then back home again in constantly shifting conditions. And we know that's exactly what's happening in the United States.
Yes. As
Winston Churchill once said, never waste a good crisis. So here's how to destroy an education system. Number one, undermine public confidence, which has been the problem for so many years in our system. Yep. He says, don't copy most Scandinavian countries, New Zealand, Scotland, or South Korea, who have mainly had smooth return to school strategies that the governments and teachers' unions introduced together. The collaboration is always the key to success. And if you're not going to collaborate, you're going to disrespect each other. You're going to wind up spending more time fighting about the things you don't agree on than moving forward on the things that your children need. And then he said also, meanwhile, underfund back to school arrangements so that class sizes are large, conditions are unsatisfactory, and your parents grow increasingly frustrated.
It's happening, yeah.
It's happening. Number two, create private alternatives, right? And so what happens, that's our pods that we've talked about. Yes. That's any institution that is now growing as a result of the failure of the community to fund the traditional public districts. And what he's concerned about is that after the pandemic, these options all become permanent because people have slotted in and then they get funded. The third one is to impose austerity, or the fourth one is to impose austerity. After the pandemic is over, ignore experts, economic advisor to Joe Biden, who says austerity is not inevitable and the public sector investment actually protects jobs and increases consumer spending. Of course it does, right? If you invest in your children, that is going to produce a workforce that is going to be effective, and it's going to be something we can be proud of. And the last one was, you can mortgage your future, make decisions on a short horizon, ignore how the world is falling off its axis, disregard how strong public education systems are the main thing that improve the future. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that is message from Canada. Close this.
Wow. Wow.
Now, I was, it just shows that we're all thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
We really are.
Sounds a lot like that disaster capitalism book also. Sounds like a lot of that.
Yes.
A lot of that.
Yes, it's a lot like that.
Never waste a good disaster.
Never waste a good disaster.
Oh my gosh.
So the second one I wanted to mention is, then we get to our national issues. There are lots of new tools for teachers, and that's a big issue that's there are many that are out there, but right now the Smarter Balanced Consortium has put out some tools for teachers, and Tony Thurman in California is pushing it out to the California teachers. And it's really, I took a look at it, it's really very, there's a lot there. So if you're interested in doing that, you can just Google tools for teachers and see it. Then we have, what's going on here? Let me open this. What's going on in other states. And the one thing I wanted to mention is in other states, in New York, there's a couple of things happening. One of them is they've brought back their students, but they did it by paying $48 million to substitutes. $48 million so far to substitutes. And that is because they had to have more teachers because they can't have as many children in the room. Right? Now this has also been done. Another school that's a district that's completely opened is in Marin, and that's Sausalito, Marin City. They have completely opened. Now they only have 2 schools, but the key to being able to open is to be able to have all of your students, and some of their students did decide to stay online, so that is the fact. But the students, the majority of their students came back, and the reason they came back was because there was an opportunity for them to do it, and the reason they could do it is because their school board agreed to set the class size limit at 15.
Wow. Wow. That's big. That's huge.
It's an amazing number.
Yeah.
There's no way the average school district in California could do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So that meant that they too had to bring in other people. That wasn't their class size originally. This isn't that was not their class size at all. And the reason was that they are what is called a basic aid district. And as a basic aid district, they're not funded by the state. You get into the complications of funding, but they are basically funded from the property taxes and the property values of Sausalito.
And they're wealthy. That's a wealthy
They're
community.
wealthy.
So
they're wealthy.
It's going to be, yeah. Yeah.
So that is just the example of how a wealthy, that's who can come back. Wow. And effectively and follow the rules and be in a classroom of 15.
Wow.
You have it just is not everybody can do that.
Not everybody. Yeah.
Unless you get the extra $48 million. That's the idea. The idea if it is resourced, and certainly teachers for years have asked for smaller class sizes. Everybody knows the research that absolutely it's not only makes sense, but it can be proven. And this is again the proof of that.
Perfect.
San Diego has had its own issues. San Diego has parent groups. There are parent groups really arguing to open, and there are parent groups really arguing, like with petitions online, to stay closed. So there's a lot of frustration in how it's all being handled, and it's just it is a really big challenge.
Wow.
The other thing I wanted to share about San Diego was the good work that they did with their county. The county of San Diego stepped up with the County Board of Education, right? Which is a whole different thing. This is not like they don't have what we have in San Francisco. In San Francisco, the San Francisco City and the San Francisco School Board are the same borders. It's the city and county of San Francisco, right? So they also have a real partnership, but they always have because it's one city and one county.
Yeah.
All right. San Diego is more like Contra Costa. There are many districts, school districts in San Diego County. The city of San Diego is one of the many school districts in the county.
Okay, it is like
Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a much bigger county with many districts.
Right. So we're more
right. So what they did was one of the leaders there, actually it's one of the supervisors, Mr. What's his name? Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher led the charge to take the CARES Act money, the federal money that's coming from coronavirus relief, CARES Act money, and deploy it to the children in the school district. So he organized an effort, and that was successful, for the county to give $2 million to the digital divide, to buy computers for the children in the school district, to give $30 million for childcare.
Wow.
$30 million for childcare.
Okay.
And another $2 million for testing, COVID testing for students and teachers in the school, in the district. And they handle it at a county level.
Sure, that makes sense, doesn't it?
That's right.
Wow.
And that's a choice, and that's got to do with collaboration, but it also has to do with leadership at the county level.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And those, I
Which
wonder
one-
how many other county are doing that, and what makes it possible for some and not others, but like you said, it's the leadership, it's some of the best practices. So if you explore those, and we might be able to do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a choice. They all have access to this money. The question is, how are they choosing to spend it? Who are they choosing to spend it on? That money flows through the county.
Okay. Good.
That's the key to that.
Okay.
Then the only other place I did want to talk about is Buffalo, and this is under privatization, but it's interesting. Buffalo's school board voted last week or week before to never approve another charter school, and that is because the board in Buffalo, New York, said that they are saturated. And the reason this is a story to me is that their saturation level, remember, we're in California, we have school districts where 30%, 20, 30%, we're almost 20%. Their saturation level in New York State is 5%. And they're done. They're done.
Set of values there at work.
They believe that's their fiduciary responsibility. We gave you 5%, we're not giving you any more. That's it. That's the cap. So they did it. They did it. And is that me? Yeah, now, there were a couple of other places that did reopen that are just interesting, and that is Kern County. The other places that have reopened, and it was just interesting, if you go to the link, you can see the pictures of what the classrooms look like. And those are in counties that allowed schools to reopen, and those are Kern County and Siskiyou County. These are counties that have much lower populations, but they opened. So Grenada is open in Siskiyou, and Kern County has opened. And it's really interesting to see the classrooms, but it's the same deal. The classrooms have smaller numbers of kids. They've had to bring in more teachers.
Yeah.
They've had to find ways to do it. They've done it.
I don't know Kern County, but I do know Siskiyou. I used to live up there. It's very rural.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
you do have, things are, doable there. You've got smaller communities. And so it's not like, masses of people, and they're it's just so smart. This reopening, it's not going to be overnight. I don't feel like it's ever going to be, it's going to be so gradual, and it's going to be phases, I think, and very cautiously, especially in our area where we have a high incidence of this virus. We have to be it's never going to be just overnight.
No.
And the kind of people think, oh, you're going to open a hub, you're bringing back schools, you're opening schools, and they're starting like overreacting. It's not going to happen like that at all. But these examining these ways that people are opening, this is so important for us to all look
Right.
at.
It's the only way to learn, right? And people are trying a lot of different things and are learning.
Yeah.
And learning.
Yeah.
So then we come to West Contra Costa. And you had a board meeting this week. Unusual. You had your annual joint board meeting, right?
Yes, we had our joint meeting with the CBOC. We hadn't had one for a while. And you know, now we're looking a lot at racial justice and institutionalized racism and what that looks like. There, it, when every time I go to those meetings, that's what comes up for me. That's
Well, tell people what the CBOC is, because most people don't know.
CBOC is a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So when you have money like Measure R, and there's been bonds in the past, it's used to build facilities, and that's all.
Yep.
And the CBOC is the oversight to make sure that those monies are, you can't use them for raises for teachers or anything else. So it's a simple, you know, checkpoint or oversight over to make sure those monies are spent the way they're supposed to be spent. And I think at some point there was a lot of bond money, a lot of construction going on. So you really needed a bigger kind of a committee, and there was just a lot of oversight, a lot of stuff to do, a lot of projects going on. And as the projects diminished, in fact, it got down to like maybe 1 or 2 schools that we were
right. Right. If Measure R had not passed,
yeah,
it would be
and
done.
It still stayed the way it was. And unfortunately, you know, there's people on that committee that just seem to think that it's a Supreme Court appointment and that they should, you know, people have even said it's about power and control, and there's people on it who just feel like they, you know, they want to tell the district what to do, and that they feel like they're above the board. And personally, I think there's a link between the charter school investors, the people that are the vendors, those charter and vendors, and who's on the CBOC. So there's a real, for me personally, I think there's a conflict of interest because, and I remember somebody on that board even saying schools are a big business. So there's a philosophical issue here also. If you're a person that thinks schools are a big business and then you're on the CBOC, you know, I mean, the criticisms about it and, you know, the directions that it's going to go are not what we need for students, for children to have good facilities. That's the focus we want. And and I was a liaison on there, and I went for a few months, and then I was screamed at by one of the board members there. And again, when I think about institutionalized racism and what's normalized, was a white male yelling at me, a Latina, and nobody said anything, you know. And I got one of those insulting apologies. When they say, I'm sorry you were offended, that's another insult because it's not taking ownership. I was wrong. What I did was wrong, and I should not have done that. That's an apology. But when you say to somebody, oh, I'm sorry that you were offended by what I said, that's not an apology. It's another insult. So anyway, I have not had a good relationship with this committee at all. But I have to say there's some really good people on there. Unfortunately, they get drowned out by these Supreme Court appointees that think that they can run it and it's their job to do it. And it's just unpleasant, seriously unpleasant. I've heard that some people have quit the district because they don't want to deal with this unpleasant committee. And that's just the truth of the matter. When you are constantly chastising people, it's just not good professionally in terms of building relationships. And this is a group that has a lot of problems with that. So what we need to do is we need to look at the bylaws and the policy of the CBOC, because now we have Measure R. Okay, Measure R is going to affect a whole different new set of you know, construction projects that we want to see going forward. We really want Kennedy, Stige, and the Mandarin School. We want these to benefit from this new Measure R. So that means going back to the drawing board and redoing the facilities plan. And that's the goal, to do that. Right. And
there's a process in place, right, to start that. They're looking at
absolutely
revisiting the criteria, because those are, you know, the criteria and the group that developed that criteria, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah, that things change. So we need, and so now more than ever, we need cooperative relationships with our CBOC. And you know, bless their hearts, that's just the way things evolved. But it's a new day, and we are looking at equity and inclusion and diversity, and you know, we need that committee to reflect that. And more importantly, it needs to be more accessible to community members. You know, not so many meetings, not a huge committee, not meeting all late into the night, extra subcommittees, and we don't need all of that. That's just kind of over the top, and it's not necessary. It doesn't make a big difference. So we need to make this really accessible to the community, to people who have children, who,
Right.
who will be affected, children who are in the schools.
And people need to know this is not there. The district does bring in other professional auditors to do the job of, to do that kind of a job. This is supposed to be a group of community members who are just, who oversee that funding is spent appropriately.
Yeah, they're just not to audit. They're not supposed to be doing the auditing or controlling the audits or demanding audits. No, that's not your job. So that kind of input. So that's, to me, my big goal, to go back to the board and for us to, you know, we do need to change the bylaws and make this more accessible to the community so that we can recruit more people to be on it. And like, again, you know, when we look at privilege, when we look at who has privilege, you know, and right now with racial justice, it is just some people are going to have to give up some of their privilege in order for others who have been denied it to be at the table and to be able to have a voice. That's just a fact. And
right. That's
so
just a fact.
It's going to be difficult for some people to give up because they don't realize. I think some people just don't realize how much privilege they have. They really don't. So we are going to just do this as carefully as we can, but bringing it to the attention of everybody that change has to happen. The change has to happen. So that's the big thing with the CBOC, and it will be coming up again. And if there's people who are concerned about, you're affected by your community person, affected by the Mandarin School, affected by Stige, concerned about Kennedy High, let us know. And we want your voice at the table around on the facilities team. Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. And there's more than one place that you can have that voice. I mean, it doesn't have to be that you're on the CBOC.
Oh.
There are a lot of other options that, I mean, especially when you're going to have the team to redo the criteria, right? That's going to be a big community outreach.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Now,
so,
the other place you're going to have community outreach is with the search committee, right?
Yes, yes. And this is so interesting. So, you know, if you ask how that is going, I've been asking, you know.
This is the superintendent search committee, so that
So
people know.
3 individuals on the board want to start this search right now. It's very much like the Supreme Court appointment. They want it right now before there's a change of president. So these want it right now before there's a new board, because you know the new board could decide Duffy does an amazing job. We want to even keep him for a year or 2 more. They could do that.
Yes, they could.
This board, oh, they don't want that. So they want to rush this appointment and search so they can do as much as they can. And so they appointed this subcommittee. I volunteered for it, but for some reason I was not chosen. And I don't know if they're meeting. Apparently they don't have to be public, but I think we could request that it be a Brown Act committee, and that way it would have to be public. I would think the public would need to know about what's going on. And it needs to be as part of our standing reports. We need to have a report out at every meeting. How's it going? Who's there? What are you doing? Where are the minutes? And things like that. We can't do this in secrecy. That's just not appropriate. And this is a group that talks constantly about transparency and parent involvement well, the parents can't be involved if they don't know what you're doing. And so it's kind of hypocritical to not be public. This should be a public, this committee open to the public. So that's that with the search. And we'll stay tuned for that. We'll be ongoing.
Exactly. Stay tuned. There'll be more. I just wanted to do some updates.
Okay.
So the updates this week all have to do with Governor Newsom and what he decided to sign and what he decided not to sign.
Oh, yeah.
So he decided to sign something we have talked about here for on a number of occasions, the Racial Justice Act. He signed that. So that was supported by many different groups, and certainly we advocated here for folks who are watching to advocate for the Racial Justice Act. So that is now going to be law. What he didn't sign was the ethnic studies requirement for high school, right? So there is the ethnic studies, there's still, the other one went through, which was the higher education ethnic studies. But this was to have an ethnic studies class to be a requirement for high school graduation. And he wasn't ready to approve the way it was drafted. And so he basically sent it back to Mr. Thurman, to our superintendent of public instruction, and who leads his department leads the team that are making the changes to make additional changes and make it more inclusive. So that's what's going to happen. That didn't get signed.
It is so confusing to me because Mr. Thurman put on a series of ethnic studies webinars, and he explored this, and he had great experts come out and talk about it. And right now we're in the middle of racial justice movement. And how is this? I'm very suspicious. What's going on behind the scenes to block this?
There were a lot of emails. He received a lot of feedback from people who wanted more, who wanted other things. So I've got links to a number of articles. This is not, oh, well, this is over for right now, no. But the ethnic studies conversation is not over. So the ethnic studies conversation is going to continue.
And the other thing to note is this doesn't stop school, like our high school, from having ethnic studies classes.
No, no.
So that's happening.
It just puts off making it a requirement and having a curriculum framework that everybody's agreed to. That's the key thing.
And colleges can still require it.
Oh yeah, they can. They already have. That one is passed.
Yes.
This one is the high school one.
Yes.
Right? But this one was it's coming up with how you're gonna what gets included and what doesn't get included. That's really what the story is about. And so it's not done. The story is not done.
Yeah.
The other one was the LCFF letter that was sent by public advocates and the funding around whether or not to allow school districts to take money that had not unspent money in their funds, unspent LCFF money, and then put it into the general fund, to move it into the general fund if you had money in accounts that was unspent.
Okay.
And so the argument, he vetoed that. And what he said there that he was going to make a change. Let's see what he said. That, here it is. He said that he would, as written, the law would necessitate the State Board of Education to initiate a lengthy rulemaking process to amend the LCFF spending regulations, to add definitions and make other necessary changes to clarify the requirements of the bill. This process would likely delay implementation for 2 school years. They would have to go to the lawyers, right? They added a lot of requirements, and if you're going to add requirements, you have to put in all these, it's complicated. Mm-hmm. The bill would also impose new and unnecessary procedural requirements on schools that are and will be managing unprecedented challenges now related to COVID-19. And so the other thing he said is, wait and watch my budget. I'm going to make changes in the budget in January. Okay. Anyway, but so there's a list of everything he signed, and I've got this in here, the list of things that he signed, together with the list of veto messages that he had. And
Yeah.
he had a lot of work to do this week. That's why he had to get them all out.
Yeah.
And so that's our updates of things that have gone forward.
Cool.
And the only other thing I wanted to do was, was a shout out.
Okay.
So now, have you got any shout outs this week?
Oh, just people were constantly still working on, I saw something about social justice fatigue, but there's, still working, and we can't give up. We can't give up. We got to keep working. It is exhausting. It is frustrating. But my heart goes out to everybody who is they're going to continue fighting, because this is the time we have to make make real changes institutionally, systemically. So my shout out goes out to them. And I just have a couple of other things before we leave about immunizations. Please, parents, have your children immunized, because we can't count them as being present. If school was going on, they'd be sent home they don't have their, immunizations. And there are places where you can get them, and the county on the website, it has more information.
It's free. You don't have to worry. It's free. Nobody's going to ask you about documentation status. None of those things.
And we could probably post some things.
Yes, absolutely. I'll post it up here.
Yeah. And just, do wellness checks on each other, your friends, your colleagues. Let's all just do that.
This is Wellness Friday, right? That's what here we are.
It's wellness.
It is a Wellness Friday.
Yeah. So that was my kind of shout out.
I wanted to do a shout out to Mr. Fletcher, Nathan Fletcher from San Diego, who is the guy that pushed all of that money through from the CARES Act in San Diego County down into the school systems, right? There's a reason. I do believe this. This is where leadership does make a difference. And if nobody thinks to do it, it goes somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the other counties that got the same kind of that got their funding, they gave it somewhere else. Now maybe they gave it to small business. I don't know who they gave it to, or if they haven't given it out yet.
Yeah.
But I think he was a hero to the children of the county, and even though he is a supervisor, not a school board member or a county school board member, he's a supervisor.
A county supervisor.
County supervisor.
Wow. Oh,
and he led the charge with the county money, because the CARES Act flows through the county, to give that county money to the school districts to be managed through the county school board. That's how he did it.
Great. That's wonderful. Okay.
So that's it for us. Now we're up to our chuckles from Carlos.
Chuckles from Carlos. Let's see what we got here today. Oh, yes. Hopefully our Republican president will retire.
Yes.
So what's the Republicans' favorite weapon for outer space?
Oh, Republicans in outer space, all in one question. I don't know. What's our Republicans' favorite weapon for outer space?
It's the Ronald Reagan.
Of course it is. That's our space team is out there using it. Okay, so that's the Space Patrol with the Ronald Reagans.
I know.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for watching. See you next time.